Hey there, folks. I'm both excited to bring you this one and also a little bit embarrassed. What you're about to hear is a rather extended conversation that I had with Ian from Passion of the Nerd. And it was a great conversation. He was wonderful to talk to. I think people will like the results of this. Mostly we talked about sort of the differences and how we approached YouTube. And so a lot of it comes down to how we go about things. The note I need to put, and the reason this is slightly embarrassing, is we recorded this in January. I kept bouncing it back and doing other stuff instead of getting around to this. So while most of the stuff here is pretty broad and fairly evergreen in terms of our approaches and whatnot, there are a couple of specific references that do date it. Like I mentioned, that I was doing 4 videos a week. That's no longer the case. Well, not on the, main Council of Geeks channel anyways. Though I'm cut down to 2 a week. There's some mentions and references to looking forward to attending cons. Obviously, that did not happen. But if you excuse a few dated things and a few references to instances that are no longer the case, I think you'll still enjoy this. Enough of me babbling. Let's get to the conversation. Again, I want to thank Ian from Passion of the Nerd. Check out his stuff if you have not already. If you're a Buffy fan, I should hope you found his stuff by now. It's great. It goes into great he does fantastic analysis on these things. And, honestly, the man's voice. Yeah. So go check him out. Thank you for watching. I've got a Patreon if you feel like supporting me. Any amount helps, but even if you're not up for that, like, share, subscribe, the usual stuff. And you also don't really have to. No pressure, because we take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break. There we go. So, Ian, thank you very much for joining me on this.
My pleasure.
I was delighted that you said yes.
I'm happy to be here.
So, the reason I wanted to talk with you fairly specifically, because at this point I am starting to get to know a number of YouTubers in various ways, but the reason I wanted to talk to you is that you basically do almost the opposite of what I do in terms of turnaround and approach and everything. And I thought it would be really interesting to, in some ways, compare notes, in some ways, compare and contrast the way in which we approach this.
Sure.
Especially given, people tend to wonder, well, what's it like working YouTube? Well, there's a lot of ways to do it. Here's a couple of contrasting ones. I know you had another channel before the one that you are currently uploading to, which is Passion of the Nerd.
Yeah.
What was the date of the first upload for Passion of the Nerd?
It was August, we're going on 5 years ago, so whatever that is, August, we're in year 6, so it was August 5.5 years ago.
So 2014.
Why You Should Watch Buffy was the name of the video.
So, before we get into your process too much, what made you decide to do Buffy specifically? I know you've mentioned before it's not because it's your favorite show ever.
At the time, that was the case. So, I had... my background is in video production through college, specifically in journalism. And when I was going to college for technical journalism, it was the point when they were switching from tape-to-tape editing to digital editing. And they were upgrading all of the equipment at the college, and none of the professors knew how to use Final Cut, Avid, any of those machines. And so I actually got hired to teach the lab sessions of the degree that I was paying money to get at the university, because I started messing around with the technical aspect of things in high school. After college, I had certain expectations of what life was going to be like after college, and they were all wrong.
Join the club.
Yeah, in college I was kind of a big fish in a small pond, and my professors let me do whatever I wanted to. So in a school that was for technical journalism, where I should have been focusing on journalistic storytelling, my last year there, I did a student film version of Hamlet that was modernized and staged on the campus, which is great, but has nothing to do with taking advantage of a technical journalism degree. And after college, I ended up in IT, and when I got close to a couple of editing jobs, I didn't think that I could do the grind required to... I had an interview at Bill Clinton's vice president, Al Gore. I had an interview at Al Gore's TV station for an editing job, and here I had been, this big fish in college, and I thought, oh, they're going to see my demo reel and roll out the red carpet, and we have it right here for you, sir. And the lead editor of their department, first of all, it was amazing. I understand now that it was amazing that I even got an interview with with the head editor of the department. And he kind of pushed away from the desk after watching my demo reel, which had nothing to do with what they did. And he said, well, we can take you on part-time doing the overnight shift, putting the bug on all the footage. And that's the logo that's in the bottom right corner of all of the news footage.
Oh.
And he said, if you do that for like 6 or 8 months and you grind away at an editing station and show that you can do that, then maybe we'll possibly think about bringing you on full time. And at the time, I was just, I can't do that. Well, looks like I'm not going to be a video editor. And ended up sidestepping into IT for a number of years. And then...
Because that's not a grind.
Right. But it's something that came relatively natural to me. I've always enjoyed tinkering and just sitting at a computer and pulling things apart and all of that. So it seemed like it would work. But I reached kind of a point in my life where I was feeling ultimately unfulfilled and, taking stock. And at that, it was about 10 years on where I just said, okay, I've got to throw a bunch of things against the wall and see what sticks. Because the situation that I'm in currently is not working for me. And so I started writing a novel, and I started trying to learn the piano, and I started writing video scripts. And the first one was a video from one of my favorite quotes, and that started the old channel. And then I wrote Why You Should Watch Buffy, and that started the new channel. And in that video... The video ends with me saying that the first season of Buffy is a little bit rough, but here are the episodes that maybe you should watch, and I'll tell you what. I'll sit down and make an episode-by-episode guide to tell you what the episode's about, so that if you skip it, you're not missing anything.
So that was sort of the original premise.
The original intent of the episode guide was that it would be a skip guide for Buffy. And until about a quarter of the way into season 2, the cold opening of every video tells you whether you should skip or watch the episode. And then at some point, I said, if you're not hooked by now, there's no point in me saying skip watch anymore. So I just dropped that. But at that point, too, the Buffyverse audience is a very hungry for content audience, and there have been volumes written about the show, but at that time there wasn't a lot of video content available about it, so I think I was filling a niche. But the other reason for that is because Fox was so strike happy that I know from personal communication with other YouTubers that they terrorized people off YouTube from doing what I'm doing. But I kind of was in the midst of an existential crisis, and I said, well, if I can't do this, then I'm in trouble. So I argued every strike and every flag that they sent me. It didn't matter how scary.
Fox was one of the ones who would, if I ever used a video portion, they would reliably claim it. They never hit me with a strike, but they were on the short list of ones who fairly reliably would claim videos. They weren't the worst. Paramount is the worst, still, because that's the only movie studio that I've encountered that will claim a video over a still image.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So Paramount's the worst. Fox wasn't great though, and actually, it hadn't occurred to me to ask, but I guess you already kind of answered. They came at you for every upload, I'm assuming.
It got to a point in season 4, or maybe it was late season 3, where I was arguing everything. But there are multiple stages to a YouTube. There's a flag, and then there's a copyright violation, and then there's a copyright takedown, and then there's a strike, and then if you appeal that, that's the okay, well, sue me stage.
Yeah.
And if they don't sue you at that point, YouTube restores the video after 30 days. But that entire process can take up to 60 days if the copyright holder waits as long as possible to respond to your appeals.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where Fox was kiting all of my uploads, where I would upload a new episode guide, they would flag it, but I already had 11 copyrighted flagged videos in the queue. And if you appeal more than 2 at a time, if you appeal 3 at a time, they can strike all 3 of them, which causes your channel to fall offline until all the strikes clear. So you can really only appeal 2 at a time, and I had 11, and I just put up a video saying I can't publish any new content because this isn't going to work. And then I took time away, I kept appealing the flags, and then suddenly they all fell off. I appealed one, it took a day and it cleared. I appealed another one, it took a day and it cleared. I did the review for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, and it didn't get flagged. And I said, I guess I can make episode guides again. And I never got a flag after that.
I wouldn't be shocked if that started happening at the point at which the purchase by Disney was at least being finalized, because I can tell Disney doesn't give a crap, because Disney recognizes that it's all publicity for them. I've never gotten a claim on anything Star Wars, Marvel, never, not one.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Is 6 months later, it comes out that Disney was in talks to buy all of Fox's properties. And I'm sure that in order to make their properties as lucrative as possible, they cut all of the cubicle farms of out-of-work actors that were sitting there flagging everything. And it just sort of cleared up, and I haven't had a problem since then.
Not to mention, it probably made their IPs look better, because suddenly there's a bunch more content of people talking about their stuff than there was before.
Yeah, you would think. And my stuff is so pro the show. And I've had so many people tell me that they've watched the show because of the channel. But it doesn't matter. I mean, the thing is, there's not a lawyer sitting there searching for all Buffy-related content and going, is this fair use or is it not?
Yeah.
It's someone making minimum wage, doing this job on the side, who has a set of rules that they're supposed to follow, which is flag everything. And I think YouTube has done a few things. We kind of got into content ID here, I understand. But I think YouTube has a skunk rule where there's their automatic content identification system, and I don't get those anymore. And that's because I think I appealed enough of them that it just doesn't run on my videos anymore when I upload. Actually,
my experience backs that up as well, because I went through a period, because I have more than one channel. And so I went through a period where on both this channel and on Vera Wild, well, I say this channel, I'm actually probably going to upload this to the break room. So on Council of Geeks proper and on Vera Wild, where everything I put up, no matter what it was, didn't get flagged for copyright, but it got automatically marked as not advertiser friendly, which I would then have to appeal. And yeah. I would say 95% positive that originally they were flagging the Vera Wild content because I was talking about LGBTQ plus things and I was presenting feminine, and they they had a period of freaking out over that. And then facial recognition picked me up on Council of Geeks.
Interesting.
And just started auto-flagging that same stuff. Initially, I thought, they probably picked up on Vera Wild because of the tags I was using, because I would use things like cross-dressing as a tag, because it's what I was talking about. But
Sure.
And I can't prove that they used facial recognition to pick me up on both places, but either that or IP linking, somehow they tied them both together, and they were both auto-flagged as not advertiser-friendly for between the two of them for about 4 months. But then after, when I won every single appeal, they just stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they have built in... I mean, it would make sense, right? Where they have built in... Where Fox never sued me, and they said, okay, we're going to stop content IDing your stuff against this guy's channel. And, I would... when you first get into this and you first start trying to familiarize yourself with, no one's a lawyer, but so you're kind of tasked with being a GarageBand creator, having to familiarize yourself with complicated legalese, and you do the best that you can. And most of the stuff I found about, well, if you flip the clips, or if you keep your clips under a certain length, or any of that, are all wrong. There is no tried and true recipe for bypassing the system, especially if you're getting manual flags, which was all I started to get after a point.
Yeah, and all that stuff did was 8 years ago fooled the bots. None of that works anymore.
Yeah, and consequently now I still have videos on the channel where I'm using a clip where the credits are rolling and the credits are backwards. And it's like, well, it is what it is. It was a learning process along the way. But your question was why you should watch Buffy come about. That's kind of it. I was trying a bunch of new things because I was feeling creatively unfulfilled, and I just kind of realized that, I know how to make a video. I know how to record content. I know how to edit. I knew I was wildly out of practice. And, if you haven't picked up the horn in 10 years, it's not going to sound like music. But that was, for me, part of the reason of taking on editing or taking on writing an episode guide for a show that had hundreds of episodes. It was this giant mountain to climb, and I knew personally I was not going to like the first 20 videos, but the last 20 videos, I thought those might be okay. Those would be worth watching. Those I might sit down and rewatch. And so that was, for me, part of the reason to take on doing an episode guide for the whole series.
So would I be correct in assuming that your background as a video editor was what made you make the decision to approach it the way you did, which is through using video clips and for, I think, a pretty dang long time not appearing on camera and just constructing it the way you do?
Yeah, during that period, the other thing that people had been saying to me for years was, you should do voiceover. You've got a good voice. You should do voiceover.
Well, you do. But I've borrowed your voice once already.
Well, I appreciate it. But that's also one of those things where there's no real, okay, here's how you do voiceover. There's no tried and true path. There's no, here's where you apply to do voiceover. And especially in the digital era, where you can do all of that from home, there are certain people that have carved out that path, but for anyone who's just looking to break into it, I had zero idea. And so I thought, well, why don't I write some scripts and record them, and then that'll be the practice. I'll build up a body of work, voiceover work, and that'll be how I start doing it. In this day and age, it was a little different when I graduated college, where you were sort of dependent on finding a job where there was a crew and someone with a camera and someone with recording equipment and all of that. You don't need any of that now to do this. You can, if you have a phone, you can start making stuff. You can start doing what I or we do just now. Now, it's not going to... The key is having a critical eye about your own stuff, being willing to look at the stuff you love and say, what do they do well? And then how can I bring that into my own work? And 99% of the time, the answer is not buy a soundstage or it's get a microphone, turn on some lights, work on crisper edits. There are free editing softwares out there now too. So the entry point, and then YouTube, which is incredible, or Vimeo, or if you want to do live stuff, Twitch. The entry point now, or the barrier for entry, is so low compared to what it was when I graduated in 2004. I don't know how I got on that rant.
No, it's okay. I had something. There was something you said talking about, thinking that this would almost serve as an audition for voiceover. I have to wonder how many of us started out doing this thinking about the other stuff it would lead us to do, and then we just end up keep doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I quit my job in September 2008, and I still have, and that involved certain compromises.
2018, I think you.
2018, yeah, not 2008. The job I had before this were the definitive golden handcuffs. But I had been there for 7 years and was getting burned out, and it was becoming evident that I was burned out, which is not a great position to be in professionally. And I didn't want to go and find a similar job, and the channel had just begun to reach this point where maybe this was a sustainable thing with some compromises, scaling back and... I no longer live alone. I live in a house with 9 people. And I don't eat takeout every meal, but that's probably been a benefit towards my girth in the long run. Switch to Boda Box for wine instead of whatever it may be. But scaling back, now I get to write about stuff that I care about. Every single thing that I do professionally every day goes towards a thing that I'm passionate about. And another thing that comes with that, which it took me a little while to realize, is that, and I've ranted about this in videos, but when I write stuff, I'm writing stuff that I need to hear a lot of times. And that's when those videos feel the most honest. Yeah. Is when I'm I'm experiencing an emotional catharsis through the thing that I'm writing. One of the ones was, just how bullshit the idea is that do something you're passionate about and you'll never work a day in your life. It's such nonsense, and it's so crippling, creatively crippling, if you believe that that's true, because any creative endeavor involves a moment where it's hard, where it's... To me, passion is not defined by the thing you have the most fun at, or the thing that it's the easiest to, but the thing that is most worth suffering for that you do. When it's boring or draining and you've had a long day and you don't want to sit down and you don't want to do any of those things that you go and do are the things that you're actually passionate about. But again, it took me a long time to figure that out, I think.
I think we can talk a little bit about the process, because the closest that I come to, I would say out of the 4 videos a week that I am usually putting out,
which is amazing. That's a lot of output.
That's me cutting back. I did one a day for almost a year.
Jeez.
But the thing is, out of those, 1, maybe 2 a month are scripted. So
sure.
My normal process is to think about what I'm going to say. On rare occasions, take a couple of notes to refer back to if I get lost. Sit down, ramble, and then do very light edits, which usually involves little more than slapping the intro and outro on it, because I've been doing it long enough that I don't lose my train of thought as often as I used to. You can go back to my earlier videos and see a lot more edits than you do these days. But obviously, you have something where you script, and I mean, I also don't know, do you plan in advance what clips you're going to use? Do you figure that out after you've already edited the audio? What's sort of the nuts and bolts that goes into
it's a mix. For me, there's a certain amount of theatricality that goes with my style. I have great admiration for people who do what you do, who can speak on camera, and I was wondering how scripted you are. I always wonder how scripted people who do that format actually are, because it's that kind of off-the-cuff conversation about the thing is something that I struggle with. I've started a podcast in order to practice that skill set and work on that. I have a rough outline for the podcast, and then I try and do that without too many ums and ahs, but it's still coming slowly.
You're better at it than you think you are. And like, as a rule of thumb, if what I'm saying sounds like it's a properly structured argument, I probably scripted it. If it feels like I meandered my way to a point, I probably didn't.
We'll fix it in the edit, is what we used to say for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I stopped bothering, though. I'm like,
Well, so my path to get to where things are right now was kind of a strange one. The videos, the first season, I was leaning harder into the review aspect of the video. So I think that my videos have multiple components when they're working the way that I want them to work. So early on, I would sort of talk about, I don't like the lighting, or this is campy, or whatever it is, and I would include a smattering of analysis. Well, this is a metaphor for this. This is this thing. And a lot of it was based on this book that I had just read, which I have espoused many times on the channel, and it is listed in the description of every video. It's a book by a gentleman named Mark Field called Myth, Metaphor, and Morality in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And he wrote a telephone book tome that is an episode by episode by episode breakdown of all of the academic aspects of the text. And when I was just doing this for voiceover practice, I thought, well, this is interesting. We'll include some of this and see if we can build out an interesting script and so forth. Then it started to get an audience. And then I started thinking about things I hadn't thought about since college, like citations and all of those things. And so what I did was I had a little bit of a panic because the videos were starting to show up on Reddit, and I thought, I'm not in the clear here. So I found Mark's blog, and I emailed him, and I said, hey, I read your book. I loved it. I've started working on this video series, and honestly, some of the early essays that I've written for this are not what I would call kosher under normal circumstances. So I wanted to reach out to you. At the time, the channel wasn't monetized. If you're not comfortable with this, I'll take it down. I'm going to add a citation in all of the videos. And he watched the channel, and he said, oh, you're going to reach way more people with this than my little book did. Keep going. He said, and he put up a blog post on his website saying there's this new YouTube channel called Passion of the Nerd. Go check him out. But ever since then, that was when I started thinking about form more so than I had been to that point. But for a while, there was a question of people loved the content that was Mark's. I stopped referring to the book, but I had part of what I was the bits about. As I said, I was dealing with my own existential crisis at the time, so the bits about Camus and existentialism and Sisyphus and all of that were things that I wanted to write about so that I could digest that myself. so that I could understand the philosophy and the idea of choice and meaning and purpose and all of that. And that was very much, his book was a very academic text. So for a while, other than, the occasional penis joke and the Giles knockout counter, I didn't really understand what I was bringing to these videos that was unique from me. But mercifully, Mark was behind the process. And so I got the time to explore and figure that out. And it was the video for I Only Have Eyes for You. And in the episode, Angel's soul, Buffy and Angel are separated. Angel is now soulless, and Buffy feels guilty for having slept with him. She believes that she's the cause for him losing her soul. And in the episode, the high school is infested with two murder-suicide ghosts. And the murder-suicide ghosts take over Buffy and Angel. But Buffy is taken over by the murderer, the male. And I didn't understand the twist until I started kind of pouring it through my own personal experience that I was dealing with at the time, which was I had been going through a breakup. I felt responsible for the end of the relationship and why things had happened. And I started to understand, Buffy needs to forgive herself for what happened to Angel. And there's a very Giles, her overseer, her watcher in the episode has a wonderful line where he says, "To forgive is an act of compassion, Buffy. It's not done because people deserve it. It's done because they need it." And in that video, there's a line where I said, this episode exists to give Buffy the space and peace for one of the most difficult acts of compassion, the act of forgiving herself. And it was a moment where the academic philosophy that we'd been building up and the drama of the story and my own personal experience in my own life all came together in the script to create something unique, which was we had looked at the bones of the material and the philosophy of the material, and then we emotionally put it back together again and said, here's why this is important to us as people, as human beings. And that was when I found my voice with the videos, was through that particular one where it's like, there's such a thing as an academic disassembly of the material, but be able to then look at its component parts and emotionally put it back together again was something I hadn't seen before. That's the theatricality that I was talking about. And it requires a little bit of drama. It requires a little bit of, emotion. And I know when I've done it right, and I know when that feels disingenuous. And you've seen many videos like it, when they switch to the dramatic voice and they say, this is the thing about this, and the soft music comes in the background. But there's nothing wrong with a formula if it's honest.
Yeah.
Haiku is a formula, a sonnet is a formula. It's if the words within it are truthful and resonant, then that's okay. And that was kind of when I figured that out. Again, I've sort of wandered far afield of your original question here.
At this point, I've accepted that as the thing that's going to happen. But
yeah,
it is true about having some truth there. And the funny thing is, I think that gets brought up more frequently with YouTubers who approach it a little bit more like me, because there's a presumption of honesty when you're not working off a script and when you're talking off the cuff that is not always necessarily there. And I know that it doesn't get asked too often anymore, but I remember seeing a couple of years ago, and like one of the first videos I did I've never had anything go viral by anybody's standards other than my own, but like the first video that kind of did much more than I was used to was a very angry video about what was at the time the DC film continuity. And this was just before Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, had come out. And I thought the entire thing needed to be burned to the ground. And I was very genuinely, I vented. And I remember seeing the numbers and like people like, it's a lot of fun to see you this angry. And my cynical brain thought, ooh, I should keep being angry. But that was very quickly cut off by, if that's not genuine, then it's going to get real stale, both for me and for them to watch.
Yeah, some YouTubers have made a career out of rants, and
but by view numbers, it probably would have been better for my career to become that angry guy. But I'm like, I will start hating what I do.
Yeah, I mean, some of my funniest videos on the channel are for the Buffy episode "Go Fish," which is one of the bottom 5 episodes in the series.
That thing's so bad.
My Twilight review is probably one of my, but over time, and this might just be because I'm getting older, I kind of just am more excited by a celebration of a particular thing than I am a takedown piece. And the other thing too that has been everyone deals with this in a different way, but as I've gotten to know my community that has sprung up around it, there's a lot of voices. There's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of people everyone has a favorite episode. And if you think that there is an episode that is universally reviled, there's going to be a handful of people that tell you it's their favorite episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a you go through a process of, do I water down my own voice because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but then I'm creating milquetoast content, or do I go for the kill because it's more entertaining? And I just don't like that debate, so I have over time tended to shy away from it.
Well, see, it's funny. I think I'm more liable to, as you put it, go in for the kill when I'm not scripted, because when I actually write my stuff out, I put so many qualifying statements on I practically, my first drafts of scripted stuff are practically in legalese. Yeah. In terms of defining my terms and explaining that my saying this doesn't mean this and I'm not saying that. But when I go off the cuff, because I'm not stopping to put that many qualifiers on everything that I say, it can get harsher. But the thing, at least in terms of not trying to rub people the wrong way, is I do always end the videos with the encouragement, whatever your thoughts are, put them down there. And if people disagree with, if I say that I did not like something, or if I say I hated it and someone says, I really like this thing, if I reply to that comment, it's usually to say, I'm glad you liked it. I wish I had.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to get there in a way, too. You're better off. You had the better experience because you got to enjoy this thing that I did not.
I'm jealous that you had a good time.
Yeah. Buffy's also a unique case where it's so theme-driven that sometimes if you're lampooning an episode, the episode has dark and heavy themes that if you don't have that life experience, maybe you don't identify with the episode as much. There's an episode of Buffy called Beauty and the Beasts, which is the show's first attempt, I think, to grapple directly with abuse and an abusive relationship.
One, yeah.
Yeah, and it never really worked for me because the characters at the center of the abusive relationship were incredibly tropey, and so I struggled to relate to them as human beings and to sort of the episode ended up to me at the time feeling like an after-school special more than what Buffy is at its best moments, which I consider high art and some of the best television ever made. But I got messages from people after that who told me that they had dealt with abuse in their lives and they were so hurt that I didn't like this episode and reviewed it so poorly. And, it's just an interesting. It's at the end of the day, I've just learned over time that the content works when I manage to shut out the world and sit down and write something that is honest from my perspective. And when there was no audience, it was easy to do that, and then it became very difficult when there was some audience. And now that things have gotten to a point where they are, people would rather watch a video of mine that they disagree with than watch one in which I'm not being totally honest, because they'll be able to tell. But they don't know that, I think.
One of my favorite kind of comments to get, and I get it often enough that I feel good about what I do most of the time, which is somebody saying, I don't agree with you, but I understand what you're saying. Or I
love that comment.
I understand the point that you're making. And I'm like, cool, because I didn't necessarily need to convince anybody. But if I presented what I'm saying well enough, then you at least know why I'm saying it, even if you don't agree.
Yeah, I disagree with a lot of what Ian said, but he pointed out things I'd never thought of before. Is one that I get quite often. I said, okay.
That one's always a weird one to get, because when someone says that's something I never thought of, 9 times out of 10 it's something that is stupefyingly obvious to you, and like you didn't put a ton of thought into that. You just said it, and someone's like, I never thought of it that way, and you're like, really? How weird does it make me that my brain just immediately went there?
Well, people also, the other thing too, there's been a vast difference between when I originally watched the show and then watching the show for the purposes of a review. And so often an episode that I found kind of mediocre or not particularly interesting becomes vastly more interesting than it was before, because I have this process now of, okay, what are the themes that they're going for? How does this connect? And how can I apply this to my own personal life so that I can find a connection to the material? You know, there's this methodical process that I have of digesting the material that is not something that occurs when I'm just watching something for the purposes of entertainment. And there was a gentleman who left a comment the other day on an Angel review that I did for an episode called Untouched, which again was about abuse. But in this case, it was much more, the character at the center of the story was one that I felt was much more human and relatable, and it elevated those themes and that material to something that just felt desperately human and personal and hard to not connect with. But a gentleman left a comment on the video that said, I don't watch television to see stories about abuse, and I'm not looking for the meaning of life, and I don't care about themes. I watch TV to be entertained because life is desperately depressing enough as it is. And I'm thinking, okay, more power to you. Why are you commenting on a channel that's dedicated to understanding the meanings of a particular television show?
That's one of those ones, like, you don't reply because it's a bad idea, but you think to yourself, you must be new here.
Yeah. I'm sure you've... I think one of the first things I messaged you about was you responding to comments, which I thought your approach was admirable. But I think that's also a gauntlet that anyone doing anything in the public eye needs to run and figure out, what do I respond to, what do I mute, what do I block, and more often than not these days I just mute and block comments, because I have enough negative commentary going on in my own head, and if someone happens to say something that echoes a voice that's already in my head, then that voice is validated and it becomes hard to dodge. He's got
backup now.
Yeah. He's got evidence. And I believe in having a critical eye about your own stuff, but there's a critical eye and then there's a self-destructive eye.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's just the most important thing is to just make the next piece of content. So I don't know. Let me answer your actual question instead of wandering off and doing answering the question that I wanted to answer, I guess. But you asked me what is the concrete process. So I just wanted to introduce that by saying there has been an evolution to the process when it came to first figuring out my voice.
So why don't we go with what it is now at this point? Roughly how many times do you find you end up rewatching an episode before you end up getting, not counting how many times you're going to be watching it while you're editing?
These days it tends to be twice. Sometimes it's been more. It depends on the episode. I did a 35-minute review of Restless, which was a dream sequence episode of Buffy, where I unusually went scene by scene.
Well, that's a dense son of a gun to unpack. So
Yeah. But so that's on the high end. On the low end, it's twice. So I'm working on a review right now, and the first time I sit down and I watch the whole episode and create a summary for it, and in the section underneath the summary, I write down ideas for themes and scenes that relate to those themes, and all of that. And while I do that, I also live tweet the... I don't know how I started doing the live tweets, but for the first draft of the script, I sit there and I tweet out observations or little bits of commentary about different sections as I go through the episode. And those tend to have a pretty strong following. And occasionally people have said stuff in the live tweet session that has informed one perspective or another in the video itself, which has been an interesting part of the process. But so that's probably takes about 4 hours to watch a 45-minute episode. The thing that I found was that that's not a healthy way of consuming a piece of entertainment, and I think that's important for sort of understanding the bones, but it's also important to put it back together again. And so I do a watch a day or two later where I don't have my laptop open, and I don't pause, and I watch it front to back so that, you know, all of the little tiny observations can kind of be cohesive, and I can have a cohesive sense of the entire thing. And then then is the most difficult part of the process for me, which is the writing process, which is sentence by sentence by sentence, grappling through the script and moving things around and trying to understand what my conclusion is going to be. And during that first, you asked how much of the edit is in the script. In that initial part of the process, anything in one of my videos where I cut to the actual sound from the clip, so Buffy is saying something to Giles or whatever, and I actually let the sound play, those are actually usually in the script. So I'll write a little piece of time code and then the quote that the character says, so that during the edit I know, oh, I want to include that, and I know kind of roughly where it is. I would guess that's less than 10 sound bites per video.
Yeah, you don't pull a lot of the direct sound.
No, and I mean, part of that is avoiding copyright flags. Again, yeah, I've sort of fallen into patterns with the construction that worked for avoiding the flags themselves. But when it comes to the actual edit that goes over my voiceover, that's typically just instinctual. Editing is very, very, very musical. And that's not something that I could script out. I need to hear the sound, the rhythm of what I said, and then in those I can, in my head, hear where a cut is supposed to be. And I mean, there's no real other way I can describe it. It's you feel a good edit the way you feel a good piece of music. And when I'm cutting things and figuring out the rhythm and all of that, and let alone if there's music underneath, that needs to be done in the edit bay. There's only so much of that, and it would be a waste of time anyway, because I'm much faster finding that rhythm myself, listening to my own voice and cutting over top of it, than I would be writing copious notes in a script, which is the opposite of doing other types of editing. So if you write a scene between two characters, you want every shot planned before you go and shoot anything. You create a shot list, and you know, okay, we're going to need an over the shoulder, because you need all the coverage. You don't want to get in the edit bay and realize you forgot to shoot something. or have to sit on your wide shot longer because you didn't get the close-up that you needed here. So you do a shot list and a storyboard, which is basically the entire edit beforehand with many other types of editing, but that isn't the way the kind of editing that I do works.
Well, yeah, because you're working off already shot material, so
yeah,
that's a big part. It's funny because for me, just isolating it to the videos that I do script, the writing for me actually flows very naturally. And I think maybe part of that is because I tend to write at least for the purposes of videos, I tend to write the way that I speak anyways. So I tend to just do on paper what I do when I sit down in front of the camera, which is just blah, blah. And the difference is when I script, I then can go back over it and go, okay, well, this thought should go here, that should go here, I need to expand on that, and then just refine it. But first draft is just spewing out basically on a page what I normally do on a camera, and then just going over it a few times, which isn't something I do when I shoot unscripted. But that's a process that I find goes fairly easy for me. But then anytime that I have to edit where I'm using other footage, and I don't do it a ton, partly because of how long it takes me. Like right now, I'm working on editing a video for about the Lego Movie 2, which I declared the best movie of last year, and I said I would put out an entire video explaining that, which is scripted, and my part of it is shot and recorded, but I'm working on the edit, and it's taking me forever. And I did a video last year on Cowboy Bebop that took forever.
What do you use to edit? Is it Vegas?
No, I use... Oh, what the heck is it? Hang on. I used to have Premiere Elements, but out of spite, I'm not currently using Adobe. I may go back after I get tired of one. I'm using Pinnacle Studio.
Oh, gotcha.
Which is working fine for me. I mean, part of it is my computer is also old and clunky, and I can practically hear the gears grinding when it's trying to render stuff. But just the another one that took me forever. I did a video on the first season of the Titans TV show, where I ended up using a lot of. I think that was the first one that I used a lot of footage from, because it was Warner Brothers and they're like Disney. They know it's all free marketing, so I knew I could get away with it. But that also took me forever. And for me, mostly it's just the process of isolating the clips, of finding what I want. And it's not that I can't do it, it's just the tediousness of it.
Sure.
Works very hard against my natural ADD. And I mean, I say that like actual diagnosed. And I do think that's a big part of why most of what I do it the way that I do.
Yeah, I mean, actually in the last 5 years I was diagnosed as well, which explained to me a bunch of things, including that interview with the lead editor when he was talking about putting the bug on the footage overnight, and me knowing, I know I just can't do that because I did not have the attention or focus in order to be able to do that. But a lot of what I do, a lot of the systems that I have put in place in my own process, like live tweeting or like streaming, after I'm done recording and I start editing a video, I live stream that to the channel. I call it the world's most boringest live stream. The thing is, even that has developed a community where people like to talk with each other and they like watching the edits in process. And I love hearing people say, wow, I had no idea how long this took. You know, I've been prone to gaps in the course of the 5 years, and people getting to see how arduous it is dissecting other people's edits and then creating a new one is gratifying. It's a positive process. But the reason I started doing that was to combat my own ADD, where ordinarily, if editing is building a wall, pebble by pebble by pebble. And certain parts of the edit are very exciting to assemble. The emotional parts, the parts where it's like, oh, this is coming to a crescendo. But the summary is agony. a lot of times. And I've gotten much better at shortening the summary, and so 75% of the videos now are analysis and commentary.
I mean, that's exactly true. The few times that I've edited something together like that, I start by doing the bits that, like, I know how I want this to go, and then it's filling in the gaps between those when all I have left to do is connective tissue. That is such a slog.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think the channel's going on 200 videos, and they're all this kind of process where you're talking, it used to take me 15, 20 hours to edit a single video, and anywhere from 8 to 12 hours to write it. And all of those times have now shortened. Where I 5 years ago knew that my skill set was not where it should be, it has now gotten to the point where I'm an efficient editor again, way more so. There's always room for improvement, of course. But part of turning on the live stream and bringing people in to watch the edit was to naturally combat my compulsion to get up and go play Hearthstone on my tablet. Or, I'm going to take a break. 3 hours later, I still haven't gotten back and edited. But when the live stream's going and the bosses are sitting there watching me, I'm more prone to just sitting there and getting the edit done. And I used to do what you just are describing, where I would edit my favorite sections of the video first and then sort of backfill the edit. But now where I've gotten to the point where it's sort of grinding. Just getting that, grinding is such a negative term. I don't mean that in a hollow sense, but you know.
If you don't grind, you don't level up.
Yeah, it's Sisyphus. Go and get the rock. It's time to go and get the rock. The rock rolled down the hill. Go get the rock. Start pushing it up again. And one must imagine Sisyphus happy is the line. So
it's funny that you mentioned Hearthstone, because I will confess to editing while playing Hearthstone literally at the same time.
My latest one is Dota Underlords. I'll have Dota Underlords over on this monitor while I'm doing other things with the channel. But again, those little systems of, I'm live tweeting now. Okay, people are sitting there. There are people who sit there and refresh and wait for the next tweet so that they can comment on that section of the episode. You know, it just helps me it externalizes things that I wish my brain could do on its own. But instead of that, I create systems outside of myself to bring me back to the desk.
Makes sense. So, like, the one other sort of major change that I can think of, or at least major step, especially knowing that you started out with, you know, your voice and cutting together pre-existing video. What were the circumstances that had you appear on camera the first time, and how hard did you find it first time you decided to do that?
Well, you mentioned that I had another channel before Passion of the Nerd, and I had done one or two video. So I come from a theater background as well. And I suffer horrible stage fright. And then as soon as I'm on stage, I feel more comfortable than I feel in my daily life. You know, when I'm in the midst of a performance and getting to be someone other than myself, that's when I feel most relaxed and comfortable.
Well, it's the 2 milliseconds between, you know, your very last second backstage and the instant you hit the lights. It's when you feel like you're having a heart attack.
It's
I do theater too. I know.
Yeah, I have crippling stage fright, and it's something I pursue. I speak at comic conventions and all of that, because the second I'm on stage, I'm playing the part of someone who is comfortable doing that and who has something that he cares about, that he wants people to understand. He wants this material to mean as much to the people that are watching as it does to him. That character is a part of me. But when I'm not on stage in the midst of that, I'm a swirl of neurotic anxiety, fear, cold sweats, all of that. So it's very kind of paradoxical, and unless you come from a theater background, it might be difficult to understand. But on the previous channel, I did a very bizarre video version of Richard III's opening monologue that started with me in a bathtub. And I duct taped the tripod to the side of the bathtub and pointed it into the water. And the whole time I'm setting this up, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? This is insane. This is creepy and weird. And this is weird. And what am I... But as soon as I get in the bathtub, now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the son of York. I'm no longer myself, and I feel good. I'm comfortable. I can be that character and feel that sort of smarmy awfulness and that narcissism that is not easily accessible for me personally. So there were a couple of on-camera things like that, but some form of that exists for me in most on-camera bits. The question was, once I had started building an audience around Buffy, people who wanted to hear me talk about Buffy, what I wasn't sure of was how interested they were in just revisiting this favorite television show of theirs versus hearing what I had to say about it and what it meant to me. And that was a slow process of rolling out personal observations and personal connections. One of my least favorite comments, because an argument for fair use is that it's transformative. And I occasionally, very rarely anymore, would get a comment from people saying, this is better than watching the show. I can just rewatch the whole show on your channel and I don't have to fire up the... It's like, no. That's not why I'm here. I'm not creating miniature versions of Buffy for you to speed watch. That's not what this is about. So I think what I started doing was I would make a joke about a particular character, and I would say I'm not ready for this scene yet. I'm still shame gorging on gummy bears and drinking wine, thinking about Angel and Buffy. And at the end of the episode, after the thing, there would be a stinger of me wrapped in a blanket with a glass of wine, eating gummy bears and listening to Adele. And people would love the joke. And then I created a top 10 list. And at the beginning of the top 10 list, I've created 2 top 10s, and they're very weird. They're not conventional top 10s because I couldn't be more bored by my own ranking of the show. So I'm always like, well, what's a different lens we can look at through? But the top 10 began with an essay about what I believed the value of tragedy in entertainment was. And dealing with my own emotional crisis, I found Buffy, and that allowed me to come through this personal pain that I was feeling. And people related to it. People wrote me and said they loved that opening essay.
So that was the episodes of Buffy to pair with wine and a good cry?
Right. Yeah, so any top 10 I'll ever... Maybe when I'm done with both Buffy and Angel, I'll do a regular top 10. But I'm working on a top 10 for this year that I want to use at comic conventions. I'm going to speak at a couple of conventions this year because I missed doing that last year. Terror aside. But it's always top 10 episodes of Buffy or Angel, parentheses, and then parentheses is whatever lens. So the first one was to pair with wine and a good cry. The second one was top 10 episodes of Buffy or Angel, parentheses, that remind us that everything is going to be all right. And that was based on something a subscriber had said, where they said, people are so lonely. People are just grappling with loneliness, and these themes and emotionally distilling these themes and creating resonance helps people to feel not alone when it's done well. That's not my intention, but when it's done well, a byproduct of that is people feel connected. I think if you set out with the intention of doing that, it becomes disingenuous.
No, it is funny because, honestly, regular top 10s they can be very hard. I have done them for Buffy, and I did one for Angel, but I talk about Doctor Who more than I talk about anything else, and I've never done a top 10 best episodes of Doctor Who overall, and I don't think I can because the eras of it are so vastly different. I
Yeah.
have to break it up by era, or I've even gone more specific. I've done like funniest or scariest or best and worst from these specific writers who have written a crap ton of episodes.
Well, I mean, what's strange is that by virtue of the metaphor that they were working with Buffy, Buffy's very similar. I mean, what are you going to compare the high school years to her existential crisis after she died and came back from the dead? I mean,
Bit of a different ball game, yeah.
yeah, every year was supposed to be a concise developmental place in her life, and consequently, the flavor of them are all so vastly different.
Oh, and out of curiosity, just talking shop, when you've talked at conventions, did they reach out to you or did you reach out to them?
I had to reach out to them. With one exception, I was asked to be a master of ceremonies for an LA Whedon-specific convention. They asked me to do it last year, and I turned them down because I wanted to focus on doing the channel full-time. But this year, usually I just apply to the Denver one. Most of the cons are going to have an application page where you say, here's what my talk is about, here's what I'm looking to do, and here is sort of my resume. I've been asked once or twice, but by and large, the ones that I've done have been because I reached out to them in advance. I just like the experience, and it's I have a strange concentration of Colorado fans. I was picking a friend up from the airport, Denver International Airport, and I come home and had a tweet sent to me saying, "Hey Ian, I just saw you at the airport and wanted to come up and say hi, but I was so nervous that I couldn't. So, hi." And I had 30,000 subscribers. And and I don't do mostly on camera stuff. Yet someone recognized me at the airport, which was a very strange experience. But when I've done cons before, there's always there's a handful of very nice people that come up afterwards and want to meet and take photos together and stuff like that. So it's a good experience. It makes me highly uncomfortable. And so I do it on purpose because I put off writing the presentations that I've done. It usually took about 40 hours to write, which is to do the entire presentation and then to create the keynote and practice it. But that's just an excuse. If you're going to do Comic-Con, you should do Comic-Con right with the full getup and all of the découtrement.
Well, I mean, I do understand what you mean about like spending a lot of time on something that you're going to stand up and read in public. Because like the thing that I had you do the reading for, that went on a video for the Vera Wild channel. But the script that I'm working off of in that video was they called it a reflection that I gave at a local church here. And I agonized over that script for a long freaking time.
Yeah.
And it was only 15 minutes was the runtime of it. But something like, I'm going to stand in front of these people speaking my own words and trying to make a point. And they're sitting right there. Like, let's not screw this up.
Well, I mean, 5 years ago, when I was in the midst of that, I was drinking every day and sort of lost, and I was having my own moment of why go and get the rock. And that was the point when I was sort of throwing everything against the wall and trying things. And ever since then, I think what I did was I distinguished for myself the difference between comfort, happiness, and meaning. And that occasionally those things overlap, but not very often. And in my life, I had become professionally successful and was very comfortable, and was able to buy certain experiences that created a certain amount of happiness. There's an old joke, you never see a lot of frowns on a wave runner, and that's true. That is absolutely true. And I'm not blind to that privilege, that I got to experience that for a finite point in time. But it wasn't very meaningful. And so much of my life had been built around the idea of pursuing comfort and happiness, and meaning is not pursuable. It's something that ensues. It's something that ensues through the pursuit of discomfort, is what I've discovered. And one of those things was starting to put videos on the internet. And once I started getting good at that and developing an audience, I said, well, what's the next thing? And the next thing was, let's go speak at Comic-Cons. That sounds terrifying. And then, so I go and did that. And then after that, it was, well, what's the next thing? I said, well, I don't do anything on camera. Why don't I start a collaborative series called Nerd Chipper that is completely on camera and all about my personal life and anecdotes and tales and things that I've learned and my biggest screw ups, and that then that was the new thing, and so it's just weird. I've fallen into this pattern of seeking discomfort. I'm sure that's a catchphrase on some YouTube channel someplace, but
probably. So is the next big discomfort writing your book?
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing. Was this year I sat down and because I had the podcast, did a summary of what worked last year and tried to be very honest about the things that didn't work. So where were my successes and where could I have done better? And then created. I love New Year's resolutions. I think any point in your life where you stop and take stock and say, where is there room for improvement? I don't give two shits how successful they are likely to be, because certain things in life are worth failing at over and over and over and over again. And so any opportunity to sit down and say, what do I want to do? And I think one of the keys to a good New Year's resolution list is not just, okay, I'm overweight and I need to exercise, so I'm going to quit drinking for a couple of months and then I'm going to go running and all that. Yes, that's on the list. But I think also you need these crazy big goals that are wild and exciting and inspiring. And for me, one of those was, all right, it's time to write a novel. Never written a novel before, never written a book. Don't know how to do that, but I have friends who know how to do that, so that's a start. But I mean,
so help me. If you get yours published before I get mine published, I'm gonna hunt you down.
Well, I mean, it's just that again. That's not for me. We'll see where things end up. But for me, the intent is just. That sounds terrifying. All right, let's just do it for the sake of doing it. I'm doing this thing on the podcast where, I'm very much shut in, and I'm not a big fan of sunlight. And I've had dermatologists actually tell me, you need to stay out of the sun. So I've started doing this regular thing on the podcast where I pick a random place to go to in Colorado once every other week. And one of them is the aquarium with lots of tiny people, and anxiety is way up, and I quit drinking for 2 months. So what? But to me, it's all about that thing, which is just be uncomfortable and see what comes of it. I sound like a Tony Robbins advertisement. I apologize, but I do this has been my mission statement lately.
Funnily enough, I think it might actually be the note to wrap up on.
Okay.
So So thanks a lot, and obviously we'll have links for your stuff for Passion of the Nerd, and you've got the podcast now.
Sure.
Anything else that you feel should be plugged?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining me, Ian.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Again, I want to thank Ian from Passion of the Nerd. Check out his stuff if you have not already. If you're a Buffy fan, I should hope you found his stuff by now. He does fantastic analysis on these things, and honestly, the man's voice. Yeah. So go check him out. Thank you for watching. I've got a Patreon if you feel like supporting me. Any amount helps, but even if you're not up for that, like, share, subscribe, the usual stuff. And you also don't really have to. No pressure, because we take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break.